Okay, you should be good.
Alrighty, welcome everybody. I am calling the Moab City Council meeting to order on October 25th at 6:02 p.m. We'll start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to ask John to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, John. All right, next up, we have citizens to be heard. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, we'll move right into Nathaniel's presentation to us on his role as the victim advocate. Happy to have you here, Nathaniel. I know you've been working really hard. We're looking forward to hearing from you. And I hope you got some questions and issues that the council would like to discuss with you tonight.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Like Joette said, I'm Nathaniel Clark. I'm the victim advocate for the Grand County Sheriff's Office, the Moab City Police Department, the Grand County Attorney's Office, and the Children's Justice Center. It's a grant-funded program that's shared between those four agencies, although the workload for each agency is pretty different, and the burden from each of those agencies is pretty different.
Would you mind moving a mic closer?
Oh, yeah,
just so we
sure.
can make sure it gets recorded and heard. Thank you.
How's that? Better? Okay. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the program. I'm relatively new in this position. I started on Valentine's Day of this year, so I've been at it for just about a half a year now. It was a fairly steep learning curve for me. I'm still very much in the midst of that, but I'm definitely feeling like I have my feet more under me. I worked for the Park Service before this, so this was a fairly big pivot for me, but I did a little bit of crisis work in the Park Service, so I had already realized that that was something that I had a real passion for and that I wanted to continue getting involved in. And this has been a really good fit, honestly. I've been really enjoying working here. It's been very rewarding. The program is pretty busy. I work with all sorts of victims of crime, primarily those defined under the legislation that provides the funding as the Victims of Crime Act. But I respond to a lot of different kinds of victimizations and work with a lot of different kinds of people. The workload primarily, so when I pull the numbers, I was looking at numbers just today, and I pulled numbers for this most recent quarter. So July, August, and September. July, August, and September. The reason I focused on those months specifically was that I was still learning the data recording software for the first two quarters. So I was under-reporting pretty dramatically, and I knew that that's just part of the deal of learning the new system, so I'm not too worried about that. But for July, August, and September, I had approximately 73 clients. 60 of those were new clients, so fairly big influx of new people that I was working with. By the numbers, those people had been affected by 90 different kinds of criminal activity. And what that tells you is that some people are affected by multiple criminal acts, not just one. About half of that is domestic violence, which isn't super surprising. There were about 15 adult physical assaults, half a dozen sexual assaults, like 15 or 16 stalking and harassment cases. That was actually a little bit of a surprise to me. I feel like I get a request for a stalking injunction consultation almost once a week. I'm starting to think that after hiking, mountain biking, and motorized recreation, stalking is maybe the fourth most popular activity in this county because there's a lot of it that I interact with. Not all those requests yield stalking injunctions, but it seems like once a week I'm talking to somebody about that kind of harassment. Those different criminal activities, they take up different amounts of time, right? Some of these things are hour-long meetings, and it's a one-off thing, and I never work with that person again. Sometimes, like if there's a domestic violence incident, it's something that I meet with the person initially, sometimes with officers at the crime scene. And that can sometimes be a 4 or 5 hour initial contact with the person, and then I started helping them move through the criminal justice system. So it ranges really dramatically. So far, the longest call that I've been on was about 22 hours straight. That's unusual, luckily. But each individual call varies really dramatically. I work most closely with the detectives with the Mona PD, and then to a lesser degree with law enforcement with Grand County Sheriff's Office. But the detectives are really who I'm primarily working with because they're the ones who are investigating more serious crimes, domestic violence, sexual assault, things like that. So I often respond with them, and I find that I work very similar hours to them, and I'm on call most of the time responding to this stuff. Let's see. So when I get a new client, there's the initial criminal victimization that brings them into my program, and if I respond to the crime scene, I'm doing initial crisis intervention, some de-escalation, providing like the basic trauma care. And because I work directly with law enforcement, I'm uniquely able to respond to a crime scene and the actual crisis moment. But all I'm really doing is kind of getting people over that initial traumatic experience and sort of getting them packaged up so that they can start to move forward. And then I really turn heavily to all the partner organizations that are available in this county. I work really extensively with Sea Haven and the Moab Valley Multicultural Center, as well as Sarah Melikoff's organization, Moab Solutions. And without those partners, none of this would work because the police department in an investigations capacity has a pretty narrow scope in how we interact with victims of crime. So I can provide the initial on-scene response, but then it really falls on the community partners to be able to support people longer term. Now, after that initial response to a crime, the other thing about the job that I really enjoy is that because I'm also the advocate for the prosecutor's office, I continue working with people through the entire process. And that's just, it's really rewarding. I can really get a good working relationship with clients that I have and help them through the entire criminal justice process through whatever the prosecution outcome is for their case. I feel like that's a decent overview of the job itself. Feel free to interrupt with questions. I work pretty well with interruptions. That's kind of how my day goes anyway. So a few of you submitted some questions, excuse me, via email in the last week, and I'll try to remember all of them. One of the questions was about how people can contact me, because my name and phone number is on the city website, but it's not really positioned very prominently. My business cards and brochures are at the courthouse and the sheriff's office, and most of the nonprofits in the community have them as well. And the question came up of what's the most appropriate way for someone to contact me? Do they need to go through some kind of a police process or some other kind of gatekeeping? And I don't actually know that I have a good answer to that because I haven't been doing this for very long, but my gut says that I don't want there being much of a barrier between people coming to me and wanting to talk about crimes that they might have been affected by. Now I say that, but if the phone number starts to get widely promoted and I start getting calls every day about people's next door neighbors being mean to their cats, that can become problematic. But I would hate to see any kind of gatekeeping going into effect between the public sector ability to contact me and myself. Because anytime we try to establish a system like that, it's just ripe for all sorts of problems. I would much rather people be free to contact me directly and help me understand what they're going through and allow me to work directly with them right off the bat. So for now, I think that just makes the most sense. And that might change at a later date. But for now, I think it's very reasonable to just allow people to contact me directly. Was that your question?
Yeah, so other people may have asked, but yeah, it was mine. Thanks. And I guess one question, just going back, because I figure this is an educational opportunity for us and people watching. Is there anything generally then in the scope of that people should understand, like this falls into the scope of what I do, this does not, because I'm guessing, or also is it important that people necessarily understand the difference in the definition between domestic violence versus sexual assault, or not so important? I mean, obviously both awful things, and you're the one
No.
to come to. Yeah.
I actually, I wouldn't worry about that too much.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've had a conversation with someone that seems like they've had a really minor stalking incident. And then as we explore what happened to them and what actually emerges, it turns out like felony aggravated assault charges. So I don't want people to get the idea that they shouldn't call if they feel like they need help. I think that's really the most important thing, because often there is more going on.
And maybe I can supplement that too, though, to clarify, like Nathaniel is not like a supplement for Seek Haven or social workers or anyone like that. He does help victims navigate the system, and he's definitely like a soft space for people to land. So when they're going through a really difficult time in their life. So I think the most efficient way is to think of it as, if someone's afraid they've been a victim of a crime, they should feel like they can call the police department. They can call the sheriff's department. Depending on the circumstance, they can call Seek Haven. And Nathaniel is a resource. But if you need things like social services or counseling or those kinds of things, there are better resources than for Nathaniel to try to hook you up, because he does have a full workload with just the regular calls that we get. So not to say that he's not forward facing and very public, but let's, feel like you can call the police department, because that's true too.
That was well said. Thank you, Carly. I appreciate that. Yes.
Yeah, and if I can interrupt real quick, I think an important distinction to make too between a systems-based advocate like Nathaniel and community-based advocates like Seek Haven is the confidentiality aspects. So Seek Haven receives certain funding where their confidentiality is pretty absolute. And as far as I understand, that's not the same bar for systems advocates.
That's definitely true. I mean, essentially, I work for law enforcement in the county, and at the end of the day, that's the agent. Those are the agencies that I work for. Whereas, is that Luke whose voice?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Luke is on Zoom.
So as
It wasn't
Luke
God,
said,
it was.
Seek Haven has almost an absolute confidentiality. There are very few things other than what we're all mandatory reporters for, and that's a crucial difference. That's not to say that I have to report every conversation that I have, because quite often I have conversations with people who have been victimized by crime. They're not sure whether or not they want to go to the police, and that ability and their control over that is hugely important. When that confidentiality comes up for me is for the most part when people share things that are significant to an investigation. Then I'm obligated to share that with law enforcement, with investigators, with prosecution, whoever is at that stage, if that makes sense.
Right.
Luke had a question that he emailed in, and Luke, I'm hoping you can elaborate on this a little bit about concerns about individuals going through the criminal justice process, getting to the prosecution stage. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, so this was a bit of an issue back when I worked at Seek Haven, and I had spoken to some other members in the community that said it might still be an issue. And a large part of it is just kind of engaging with the victim throughout the judicial process. I don't think a lot of people, when they enter into it, understand just how long things can take sometimes, particularly with how busy our court systems are at the moment. And so without a lot of contact, in my experience, we've seen victims kind of feel very disengaged and sometimes forgotten about. And it has made them rethink their willingness to cooperate with law enforcement. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword in that sometimes these victims end up being a bit more reticent to engage with law enforcement or kind of the entire judicial process as a whole in the future, just because they feel they've been let down. And then a lot of times without the cooperation of that victim as kind of like the primary witness, prosecution can't move forward. And so people are kind of left to potentially reoffend. So it was a bit of a gap, and it definitely left our some of our victims or I should say clients when I worked at Seek Haven, feeling pretty dismayed with kind of the entire system. So I was just asking to see if like how things were going in regards to that. And a part of this is required through the Utah Victim Bill of Rights. And so it's something that we're like statutorily supposed to make sure is being followed within our court systems. So yeah, I was just reaching out to Nathaniel to see if there were any ongoing issues with that. But other than that, all the feedback that I've received from MVMC and CKAVN is they absolutely adore working with you. I've had it described as like the dream team kind of like scenario. So we're really excited to have you.
Well, I would definitely echo that sentiment. They've been really amazing partners to work with, and I couldn't function without them. Luke, I feel like you hit it right on the head, talking about how long the criminal justice process takes, and it's hard to accurately convey that to people in the moment. Right now, trials in district court are being scheduled into next spring. So I mean, it takes a long time. When I start working with someone on a serious case, like a serious assault case being investigated, I might be working with them for 6 or 7 months to a year potentially, and maybe even longer, depending on how charges go and how the investigation goes. And I think that a lot of people feel very, very alienated by that process. And one of the challenges is that I think in many cases, they're just not hearing anything. Like the system is working, their case is moving through the justice process. But if 3 months goes by and you haven't heard from an investigator or an attorney or an advocate or anybody at all, it's going to start to try the patience and the will to continue of just about anybody. And some of that's perception. I mean, but a lot of these things are very easily mitigated just by making contact with people. And so one of the things that I do try to do is just once a month reach out to a long-term client and just say, hey, I'm just letting you know your case is still in prosecution. I don't have any updates, but you haven't fallen off the map. On the flip side, when I work with people that are longer term sort of participants in the process, and they haven't heard anything from any investigator or prosecutor or an advocate for many months, it's absolutely true. Sometimes by the time the next step comes, they're so fed up with the process, they're so frustrated, feel so alienated that they're just done with it because it's exhausting. I'm testifying in court and working with the prosecution and talking to investigators. Even the most trauma-informed approach is still going to be pretty painful for people and pretty difficult to go through. And so, I mean, that is a problem. That is a real problem. I don't know whether or not it gets up to the level of actual infringements of victims' rights. Part of that's just my not being super familiar with the system yet, so I might be able to speak to that with more authority, in a few more months. But I think that it's absolutely true. People start to lose a lot of faith in the system. And of course, if you've been victimized more than once, and you remember the last time you went through the criminal justice process and it was a terrible experience, what reason is there to go through it again? And that's another challenge that we have, is working with people who have been through this before and don't have great memories about it the first time. That's one of the reasons that advocates are so critical. There's a lot of data that shows that when advocates are involved all along the way, there are better outcomes through the entire prosecution process. And the criminal justice system works better if you have advocates involved. And that's one of the reasons right there. People know that they're being heard and that we care about them and that their experiences are meaningful and important to us. And that's at the heart of it right there. I think that's a big part of what advocacy is about, is just making sure people have support as they go through the process.
Right. Questions, counsel? Kaylin.
Are you serving any visitors, and what fraction of your clientele are minors?
Let's see. Definitely work with some visitors, some out-of-towners. Not a ton. I actually think that a lot of people go home and report criminal victimization when they get back home from their vacation, or don't report at all, unfortunately. But I definitely I get some folks that are just passing through, not a huge number, honestly. I was actually expecting that more of my workload would be people on vacation. Hopefully that means that they're not being criminally victimized on vacation. I don't know whether there's actually truth to that, but I can hope, I guess. For minors, when I was looking at the data from this last quarter, I had about 6 cases that were child abuse and about the same number that were child sexual abuse or child assault. There's 1 child pornography case. And you know, this is the other thing, I'm talking about minors, so it's anybody under the age of 18. So saying 6 cases of child abuse, that's pretty broad in scope. But the majority of the workload is adults. What that probably means is that stuff isn't getting reported, would be my guess. I don't think that means that there's that little child abuse happening in this community, unfortunately. That's kind of speculative on my part, though, so that's kind of dangerous. Jim?
Thanks.
Anybody else, Ronnie?
Yeah, I had a few other questions. So I can only imagine, because I know a little bit about other responders who are forced with shortages, but I assume if you're out on a call and another call comes in, we haven't been able to clone you. So I assume that person either has to wait or somebody has cross training where they are the one who responds initially.
So
Yeah.
far we haven't had back-to-back
Okay.
super overlapping calls,
Okay.
although I probably shouldn't say that out loud. The main issue though is just like you said, though, I'm the only system-based advocate. CKhaven can fill in an awful lot for certain things, but they're definitely more limited in scope than what my program can do. I get every other weekend off call. So it sounds pretty good until I realize that means that I have 4 days a month that I'm not on call. And so the burden is huge. It really is immense, and it's way more than I can realistically handle on my own. I found over the course of the summer that I slip a little bit behind every day, to be perfectly honest. And this creates that problem that Luke is talking about, where each individual person isn't getting the attention that they need and that they deserve in their case warrants. And that's pretty hard. I don't like that. I don't like to think about that, but it's just the reality of the situation. I've been trying to have weekly meetings with the prosecutor to go over pending cases and really prioritize things, because there's just not time to really accomplish everything involved in seeing these cases all through the process.
So from your observations and the comments from Luke, what, if anything, does a body like ours have some control over changing? I mean, obviously, I also wrote you about concerns about burnout, and, I feel like it's important for us to understand what's a manageable workload for someone in your position, but then, to also understand when there are more calls than we have that we can deal with. So I assume, okay, budget is always a question that can exist for a body like ours, but it seems like a lot of the other cogs in the system that maybe are slowing down services aren't necessarily ones that we maybe have so much leverage over. Or do you think there are things we could be doing to, see that people get faster resolution? Or
aside from more personnel, probably.
Yeah.
Not.
Right.
I think that a second position in some capacity is probably called for.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways that could look. I think that there could be some creativity. A second shared advocate would make a lot of sense. And one way that I could imagine that is just like my position is equally shared by 4 different agencies. And partly that helps with burnout, because the job is a little bit different for each one of those agencies. So it keeps things a little bit fresh. But even just some administrative help would go a long ways. I know that Brooke DeGraw, who's the director of the Children's Justice Center, has been pretty desperately needing some administrative assistance. So if there was even a shared position between the police department and the Children's Justice Center, that's county and city, so it would be a similar memorandum of understanding would be needed. But a position like that, even just provide administrative assistance, would also go a long ways. It might be easier to fill too. It seems I hear a lot of war stories about advocates working for 3 or 4 months and then immediately getting overwhelmed by the situation. And I seem to have found myself pretty well suited to it. I'm not bothered by that aspect. And I kind of thrive in the crisis response components. So it also made it easier to find somebody to help out in an administrative capacity rather than find another person to serve fully as an advocate. Although if I had a choice, I'd probably just get a second advocate and then find someplace to live.
Yeah, I guess this is just kind of an invitation to you and the chief and Carly. Like, I mean, I know we've always had certain tools available to us, for mental health support, or, it's different if you're a full-time employee versus blah, blah, blah. But certainly if you guys identify other tools or, peer support or something, I think we're always interested in if there are things we're unaware of. My last question was just related to, I don't know how many of your interactions deal with the situation. It could be a visitor or a resident where you have maybe a language barrier. And I didn't know, one of the other things we've talked about over time as a council is, do we have sufficient translation services or translation tools, because there's technology out there too. So I'm just curious if that becomes an issue at any point or.
It definitely does. That's when I really lean on the Mohawk Valley Multicultural Center because they can provide interpreters. Spanish language interpreters are definitely the most highly in demand. I know that the Park Service, when they have search and rescue incidences, they have a much wider gamut of languages that they need help with. But overall, like if I was rating challenges, language interpreters would be pretty far down the list.
Yeah. Okay.
As far as like mental health support, peer support, things like that, those structures exist.
Yeah.
Whether or not an emergency responder utilizes them, that's a real different story. But those structures exist. That's not where the system would fall apart. If it would fall apart.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Anything else?
I got-
Yes.
So you said that you're grant funded,
Yeah.
is that correct? And then, who pays for the grant, or where does the grant come from? And is there any of it in a time where that grant has not been renewed or come through,
So it's a relatively new program. We're in I believe, the 4th year of it. This should be the 4th fiscal year. So it's a 2-year grant cycle. It comes from the Federal Victims of Crime Act, and it goes through the Utah Office for Victims of Crime. There was a cut in the grant this cycle because we only have one position. It actually wasn't as big a deal as some of the other operations that have more advocates. But it leaves us very vulnerable. If we rely solely on grant funding, it doesn't take much of a change at all to completely eliminate the position. Some of the funding comes from the county, and CJC pays me a little bit of money as well, but they're accounting too. But the grant is the majority. So if that grant ever were completely interrupted, I would probably, I'd look at McDonald's maybe.
right? And that's my question is like, it seems like this is such a critical position, and yet it fluctuates, or it's it's not a guaranteed thing.
That's a huge vulnerability without doubt.
Any other questions for Nathaniel? Well, thank you. We do have in our budget a part-time.
There is a part-time position for this office. I recall, and Ben mentioned.
Right. So something for you all to think about. It's already budgeted for this year. I think the challenge is finding somebody as good as Nathaniel. And his idea of administrative assistant, that's something that maybe we can think about to help support at this point. But you are doing a fabulous job. We're so grateful to have you. And I know that I hear only positive things from the community about having you out there. So thank you so much, and appreciate you coming and presenting to us. And my doors are always open. You can come talk to me anytime. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Those are very kind words. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So Summer, I think you are responsible for the Zoom. So whenever Luke comes on to speak, or Lisa, if you wouldn't mind having their faces up on the screen, I think it feels like when they're
in the council chambers, and I might be able to mess with it while this is up.
okay. Well, don't worry about it for now, because the chief is up to give us his presentation on strategic planning. and what his plans are for the next 3 years. But you know, when we do get to a point where it's open for discussion with the council, it was really great to see Luke's face and have him not sound like he's coming from the sky.
Okay, I'll see what I can
If
do.
you, if you can do that, that would be great. Thank you. All right, Chief, nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
you bet.
I think before I jump into the strategic plan, I just want to publicly thank all of you for inviting Nathaniel to come today, because I think you got a good idea of all the hard work that he puts in, and it's meaningful work.
Mhm.
And he's really pretty humble in what he's talking about, because if you think about it, he's attached to victims of crime, to multiple agencies. We have multiple detectives that are managing that caseload, but he's basically a one-man band to take care of victims. And so we are hopeful that we can add to that program. It is very important. And I couldn't think of a better person. We are just fortunate to have him
Yep.
managing the program. So thank you for that.
Agreed.
As I jump into the strategic plan, as all of you know, I've been here almost 6 months now. And I've kind of just been in a mode of a lot of observing, but a lot of just trying to get things moving in the right direction. And I think this is an integral part of what we do moving forward. I think it really is going to lay the groundwork forward. And that's why I've scheduled it for a 3-year strategic plan. And then every year, I think we'll really reevaluate, obviously with input from all of you, if we need to change it. So I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to talk about where we're headed. And again, this is kind of a draft form. So if there's anything that any of you'd like me to change or add or assess, I'm happy to do that, of course. First thing is obviously we have to have a mission statement and a vision. And so our mission statement for the Moab Police Department is to provide exceptional public safety and community-oriented services while protecting the constitutional rights of all people in Moab. Obviously, we have a lot of visitors here, and we want to make sure that they feel safe while they're here, along with the people that live here every day. Our vision is to strive, the Moab Police Department, we strive to provide that exceptional public safety and community-oriented services through consistent and positive interaction with members of our community and with those who are visiting the city. We're also focused on providing a safe environment for those who reside in and visit Moab, and committed to provide consistent enforcement of laws and positive community engagement and interaction. And then we firmly believe in striking a balance between compassion and accountability. And finally, we're committed to seeking innovative solutions to keep our communities safe. We in the law enforcement, our biggest tool is to enforce laws and effect arrests, but we realize that that's not the only way that we impact public safety. And it's my hope as we move forward and look for new solutions to help people to be safe. Here's our goals and measurements of success, but basically I've boiled it down to 9 specific goals. The number one concern when I got here was recruiting and retention of professional employees. We've made great progress in recruiting. We're nearly full, but the next step is to retain those individuals, and that is going to be a bigger challenge. We want to establish a sustained culture, professional culture, create opportunities for positive community interaction and engagement, establish consistent education and enforcement of laws and ordinances. We want to ensure victims of crime receive the appropriate resources and support, just like Nathaniel spoke about. We want to implement a mindful approach to officer wellness and safety. We want to prepare for community growth and public safety needs, establish internal succession and upward mobility plans for sustained success, because I'm pretty old in my career and pretty far along. I'm not going to be here forever. But I certainly want, when I do leave, and Assistant Chief Bell leaves, we want to make sure there's someone ready to move into this position and be set up for success. And then we want to obtain law enforcement agency accreditation. There's been a lot of challenges in this police department for many years. I think this is a critical step. It's not easy to achieve law enforcement agency accreditation. It's a pretty ambitious goal, but I believe that we can do it over the next couple of years. As far as how we're going to measure that success and recruitment, the first thing as far as recruiting and retention, we want to make sure that we have a full staff throughout next year. Again, I'm hopeful by the end of this year we are staffed and we have our officers here working. At least the cadet that's imposed will be starting in January, but close enough. And then the goal is to retain them so we can really create that consistency through training, through standards, and that's how we'll continue to achieve success. I do want to add an internal social worker to the Moab Police Department, along with another victim advocate. I think it goes without saying, but a social worker can also reduce some of the workload on the victim advocate, because they can take a proactive approach to assessing challenges that people face and then better connect them to services before they become a victim of crime. And I have some pretty ambitious goals related to that. We have to solidify our policies, procedures, our training curriculum, and our standards so that they mirror national best practices. That's where accreditation comes into play. We want to establish multiple avenues of communication to the public, so we can share public safety information, whether it's a flood, whether it's ways that they can prevent becoming a victim of crime, maybe through cybercrime. We certainly need to create better ways to get that information to the public. We want to implement a school and youth resource program. We've already taken a step towards that by having an SRO in the schools, even though that's not in our budget. We're utilizing the current resources to do that. But also we want to focus on those kids that maybe have dropped out of school or in situations that are challenging, and hopefully help them to prevent them from being victims or from participating in criminal activity. Again, I talked about high utilizers. You've heard me say that before, but we want to really take a proactive approach to families or individuals that maybe have mental health challenges, substance abuse challenges. Maybe they've committed crime, and prevent them from committing those crimes in the future, or get them the services they need. We need to establish a comprehensive emergency management and response plan for the city and for our police department. Establish consistent opportunities for positive engagement between us and the community. Establish a comprehensive procedure for language services. I think Jason brought that up maybe a minute ago, but it's something we need to focus on, is how we better communicate with people that are visiting the city and who live here. And we want to establish a multifaceted plan to ensure officer wellness, as well as personal and professional development amongst all of our staff. We want to establish plans for growth within the police department. Obviously the first challenge, like I talked about, was getting staff, but there are many aspects of law enforcement that we're not engaged in, that we need to be engaged in, better engaged in, such as narcotics enforcement, such as traffic enforcement, again, social workers and additional victim services. And then again, finally, I hope to obtain a law enforcement agency accreditation by January of 2026. Just to update you on where we're at with staffing now, we currently have 19 sworn police officers. We have 3 code enforcement officers, 1 code compliance officer, a victim advocate, and 3 civilian staff members. The retention piece is going to be the most challenging piece for the council. Compensation is not the only factor, clearly, but we are several dollars behind the Wasatch Front, and that is my concern. It is so expensive to live here. Officers, they talk to their peers in law enforcement, they realize they're not making as much money, and it costs more to live here. So that's again a piece of the puzzle, and it's something that'll bring potential ideas to you, and we'll see if it can be accomplished. But in addition to compensation, we do want to create an environment and a culture where our officers have an opportunity to develop professionally, personally, where they understand we care about their families just as much as we care about their work here, and that it's a place that people are proud to serve. And that's really up to the administrative staff to make that happen. It all boils down to professionalism for me. How we communicate with the public, how we act, how educated we are, how we're trained, the equipment we have, how we represent ourselves. Really, that's what this is about, is establishing that professional culture to the point where I don't have to talk about it. Our officers expect that from each other. And I think we're making great strides there. Culture doesn't happen overnight. You have to talk about it every single day and tell people to buy in, and it's their culture. And so that's what we're working towards. Part of that is building upon our core competencies. You've heard me talk about it as well, but just being excellent at the things that we do 95% of the time. Once we achieve that, then we can build upon that expertise. We can add specialties. We can continue to achieve more and more. But we also want to train our officers to make sound decisions, and we want to make sure that we're responsive when the community or anybody complains or they have a concern about our behavior or our actions. We need to be responsive. If we make a mistake, we need to own up to it, and we need to hold ourselves accountable, and that's a part of our plan. And then it's important to me that we have a department full of leaders. A title doesn't make you a leader. How you act, how you respond makes you a leader. And we give our officers a lot of autonomy. They have a lot of opportunity to make decisions that significantly impact people's lives. And it's important that we hire and retain people that understand the consequences of their actions, and they represent all of you in our community and our profession in the way that we expect. The next kind of pillar is that community engagement piece. We are committed to building and maintaining strong partnerships with our community. We're making great strides there. We have, as Nathan mentioned, we have outstanding community resources here in Moab. And it's important for us to continue to build those relationships and maintain those and leverage those resources so we can help people. And so we're going to continue to do that. We're committed to providing consistent and comprehensive public safety information and relaying that to the community and providing better opportunities to engage people. And what I mean by that is we don't want every law enforcement encounter to be a traffic stop or when someone is experiencing a crisis. I want our officers out walking the streets, riding their bikes, just interact out at the schools, making contact with people, getting to know people, members of our community, and finding how we can help people. We can't build those relationships from sitting inside of the police station or inside of our patrol cars. We have to be out engaging people and here in the community. So that is important. And then we'll continue to work with our local law enforcement partners, our school administrators, community leaders, all of you to listen and find out how we need to change. Our profession has changed significantly since I started over 20 years ago, and I anticipate it'll continue to change. We need to look ourselves in the mirror and figure out how we can do things a little bit better. Enforcement is a big part of what we do, and Moab is incredibly unique because of the number of tourists that visit every year. And so we do need to seek that balance and opportunity to strike that balance between education and enforcement. Or oftentimes just helping people understand maybe they broke the law without writing a ticket is probably the right approach. And we certainly need to spend time focusing on those individuals that are committing felony crimes or victimizing others in a probably a more aggressive manner. I understand that extreme noise and traffic from these events is a significant concern to your constituents and members of the community. And so we're committed to consistently enforcing those laws and traffic violations that are related to noise and listening to the community and finding ways to better engage there. Victimization is really at the forefront of my mind all the time. People deserve to live their lives in a safe manner, and they shouldn't have to worry about being victimized by other people. And so when we do identify those criminal actors, we are committed to investigating those crimes in a thorough, complete, and professional manner. And the way we do that is making sure our officers are trained properly to do that. And we're not cutting corners, that we're not missing things that we should uncover. And that, as Nathaniel mentioned, we have to ensure that we are communicating with victims of crime all the way through the adjudication process and point of the case. And so if we're not doing that, we are failing people. Victim services, again, we're committed to ensuring every officer implements a trauma-informed approach when assisting and interacting with victims of crime. We do understand that the long-term effects that trauma has on victims, and we will strive to provide a sustainable support system for those people in need, getting through the criminal justice, just like Nathaniel just referred to. Part of that is also looking for ways to prevent victimization, and that's by proactively engaging individuals, families, and the highest utilizers of all of our services, conducting assessments through social workers, and finding ways to connect people to resources prior to becoming a victim or criminal behavior. And we need to partner with local service providers and other community stakeholders to identify people in need. I think that there are certainly ways advocates, those service providers, they often find out about those people that are struggling long before we do in law enforcement. And if we can work with them to build trust, we may be able to impact criminal activity and safety in our community. Law enforcement is a challenging profession, and not just for our officers, but for our civilian staff as well. There's no way that I could adequately articulate how trauma impacts them, and just the mindset that they have to be in every single day as they go from a child abuse call to a domestic violence to a simple traffic stop with a tourist. And they have to manage their awareness and their mental health and their physical health and even when we're shorthanded, the way that they eat and their ability to sleep and spend time with their family. So it is, and we as leadership within the police department, we have to take a mindful approach to that and make sure again that our officers understand that we care about them as individuals, as well as police officers. So we want to create opportunities for them to have interaction with mental health professionals. We want to ensure that they have ample opportunity for physical exercise. We want to encourage them to engage with the community in positive ways, such as coaching baseball or basketball or just attending events. But again, when their own interactions are negative, it impacts them just like it does victims of crime. Training and education are also extremely important aspects of this. We want to make sure that all of our employees are focused on that again, those core competencies, but also developing themselves. And so post-secondary education is something we're very appreciative of the fact that there is tuition reimbursement for our officers. And I want to ensure that they take advantage of that and better themselves and prepare themselves and just continue to learn and grow. I promise I'm almost done. So sustained success. I mean, for me, we can certainly get to a point where the machine's running in the right direction and the train's going down the tracks, but it's important for me that it's sustainable for even when I'm not here. And so we need to continue to prepare for the future growth and visitation in our community. Again, I want to seek opportunities to expand our police department staffing and our impact within the community. We are committed to preparing our officers and our staff to lead, even when we're gone. And again, we want to make sure that every member of the police department is equipped with knowledge, training, and experience to make sound leadership decisions, even when we're not around. Although we better be around and be available to our people. Again, I want to seek law enforcement accreditation, make sure that we're meeting the best national standards, best practices in all facets of our job. And then again, we're seeking opportunities to add additional victim advocate and social worker resources into the department to better sustain and serve victims of crime and people in need. Just these additional pieces of the police department right now, code compliance and enforcement. They are important initiatives, as you're aware. We receive complaints concerning information about things that are going on in the community, and they are tough situations that our officers have to balance. But we want to make sure that they're taking an approach that is more focused on voluntary compliance and less focused on actual enforcement and punitive action. So that's really just us being mindful of that. And we also need to recognize that a lot of times these violations occur just because people are not aware. I think most people want to follow compliance, and it's an opportunity for us to educate them, engage them, help them to follow within compliance. And then those people or individuals or businesses that don't want to do that and just disagree with that, then obviously there are processes in place to help them to get there. But we want to continue to build relationships, maintain positive relationships, and help our business owners, our community members to find a pathway to success. Our animal shelter, animal services, they are committed to providing compassionate care for animals who enter our custody. We want to make sure that we're reuniting animals with their families or owners that are caring towards those animals. And then we want to, again, foster relationships, build relationships within the community to find better solutions for some of these issues. And then I think this is the last slide, but as we experienced this year, emergency preparedness and response is a big challenge. We need to make sure that we are doing our part within the police department to be prepared for those things, have a plan in place to be collaborative with our partners in the community and members of the community and ensure we're getting information out to them. And so we definitely need to develop comprehensive and applicable emergency and operation policies and plans and make sure that the community trusts that we're going to keep them safe during an emergency. It's a lot to digest, I know. I flew through that, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have for me.
Can you explain what law enforcement accreditation is?
Yeah, so basically there are national standards that are out there for policies and procedures for the amount of training hours each officer should have, other standards, a type of equipment you have, but essentially it's all that information out there we need to have to achieve it. And I really just think for us, it's not something that happens overnight, especially in a department that is as inexperienced as we are, just due to the fact that we've hired so many new officers. So it's just going to take time for us to get the policies in place, make sure they meet those standards, make sure we're bringing the right training. Because, there's just like any profession, you can train, it's specific training that we can provide to officers. And then you have to have a clear documentation that we've achieved all of those things in order to receive the accreditation. But it is something that's tough, and there are more and more agencies are getting there. But again, just because of where we come from and some of the challenges we faced in the past, I feel like it'll really be a step in the right direction to continue to build public trust and show that we're moving the department in the right direction.
Okay, thank you.
Ronnie.
just a quick process question. Is this just something that your department adopts as a plan? Do we, as the council, have to adopt it all? Okay.
It's
And then-
an internal.
Oh, okay. I
kind of more
didn't,
like a work plan.
okay. I didn't know if it was externally facing, so if people would go to the website and find it somewhere, or if it, the
Could.
public,
Oh,
or, oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
should.
it's certainly publicly available.
Yeah, or I didn't know because there's so much great information in it. Can the council get a copy of the slide deck from tonight? And then I think just the other one was kind of a process question to help me understand. I didn't know, with your big hat that you have to wear, if this all just kind of fell on you as the new chief to put the plan together. I didn't know if it was a kind of a department wide, everybody contributed. I'm just curious how the.
Well, I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
coming from the Department of Public Safety, I've been a part of a process like this for years. And as part of the observation process over the last 6 months, I've spoken to many people. There are certainly a lot of things in the plan just inherently should happen in law enforcement. And then listening to a lot of people ask a lot of questions. And I think this is really one of the final pieces, is getting input from all of you. If there's something I'm missing, or we are missing, or that you'd like to see from us, we certainly want to add it in the plan. Because for me, it's, there is a lot to digest. It is going to be a public facing document, but I want this document in every officer's hands so they clearly understand what we are trying to accomplish as a team. Because if I just talk about it and they don't really know, we'll never get there. So it's more of a guiding document for us. The community can see what we're trying to accomplish and why we do things. And it also gives us kind of a measuring stick. So we show that we're achieving things, we're moving in the right direction. If you don't have goals, you'll just kind of run around in circles, right? So this really gives us an opportunity to be focused.
Okay, and the last thing was just, please don't apologize for it being too long. I actually think there was so much good content in there, and it's actually very educational for us, and we've lacked some of this education in the past. So thank you for spending the time. What is the best way for those of us who are elected officials who work on the budget to understand which elements of the plan are funded and which ones are currently lacking funding? Is that just something better for us to sit down with you, or just, ask for a highlighted copy or something?
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
I'll be frank. I
Yeah.
feel very supported as far as funding from all of you.
Yeah.
Did I miss the public safety building thing? I did. didn't I?
You did.
I saw that on
I
there.
saw
No,
it.
I
How
did
did I
see
miss
that.
that? Flying through.
We see
So
where
there-
that
there
sits
are-
in your
there-
priorities.
There are a couple of things, I think it's important, and that's a big thing, and it's a long-term goal. I don't believe it to be something I'll see come to fruition. But the Moab Police Department is in need of our own public safety building. So is the Utah Highway Patrol down here, and so is the Grand County Sheriff's Office. And that's why I want to kind of get it out there, because it's an opportunity for us to bring those similar resources together at some point down the road, whenever that's fiscally responsible. And in order to help us to be more united when it comes to emergency preparation, when it comes to planning, when it comes to public safety. And so that's really the big thing that's not funded. Everything else is pretty well funded outside of the fact we do need additional victim advocates, at least one. I am working with Utah State University currently to get an intern as a social worker, and I think that'll be great, at least to show you the benefit before we ask for funding there. And then we do need more officers, but I understand that's a big ask when we haven't been staffed. We are going to get staffed, and we're going to show you what we can do with the people we have. But there are a lot of things in this community that do need our attention. There are narcotics in our community. But that takes a great deal of effort, not only from the Moab Police Department, but it takes collaboration between us, both sheriff's departments in the area, and the state, in order to do that the right way, and use oversight. And so outside of that, those things though, I feel supported. I don't want to say outside of feel supported. Those are certainly things that we should be talking about when budget discussions occur. And then just the pay and the retention, the compensation for officers. And that's a challenge. I know I'm not the only department that's asking for funding for that. I know many people need more compensation. But from my perspective, if we don't retain these officers through compensation, we're going to pay for it anyways, because it costs far more to hire people in this profession than it does to retain them.
I guess my last thing, and I don't know if colleagues have any feedback, is everything in in your plan seems important. If there was one thing that made me a little bit nervous personally, it's the enforcement component, because I do feel like we've tried over and over again to educate. And personally, I'm kind of ready to be South Wellington. I would personally like to have the reputation that you know you don't speed when you come through Moab, for example. So just know that's the one that I'm personally going to be struggling with them. Haha.
Well, I can put you at ease because I am very enforcement minded. I have been my entire career. I just don't want that to be the only tool that we have in the toolbox, especially, every criminal action, any violation, they're different, right? And we certainly need to be very aggressive when it comes to preventing victimization or supporting victims of crime. But I agree, we do need to slow people down, and that people that are in our city walking across crosswalks should feel safe to do so. That is an important thing that we enforce is speed violations and people running crosswalks and running red lights and things like that. So we do take it seriously. We are having discussions about implementing a couple of motorcycles in the city. I think we have funding through other avenues to accomplish that, but you have to have officers that are trained to do that. And so, but yeah, we are committed to that. I just want our officers to be able to make use what I call informed discretion, right? Sometimes the conversation will do the trick. Sometimes it takes an arrest or a citation, and I hope that we can do a job of teaching them what those moments are.
Thank you.
And just so you know, the motorcycles are electric.
They are. Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool. And hopefully that'll retrain some of our officers.
We hope so. They are pretty cool.
Thanks, Ronnie. Who else? No? Luke, do you have any questions for the chief? I guess the one question I have that I didn't see on your list, and maybe it's not appropriate, is dispatch. There's been a lot of conversation around us about, and I know you've been meeting with EMS and fire department and others about that. Do you see that as something that you would like to see improvement on or a part of your strategy over the next 3 years?
Yeah, it certainly is a topic of discussion. As we know, I don't want to be disparaging, just come across as disparaging towards current administration, but I know there are going to be changes in philosophy because there are going to be two sheriffs onboarding. We also do have the opportunity to engage with the Department of Public Safety if we feel like there could be maybe a more cost-effective way or more efficient way to manage dispatch. But I think for me, it's smart to give it a little bit of time and kind of seek some answers and information before making a firm decision. There is another item that's attached to that though, and that is the purchase of our records management system, which we do have budgeted, we do need to move forward on. But dispatch is a huge component of that because the records management system ties to the dispatch CAD system. And if we are intending or we even have any thought of going to another dispatch center, we may want to take a look at our systems. I do have some coming in to give us a demo, just because they're not cost-effective records management systems. But at the end of the day, we want what we purchase to be really effective and help our officers to be more efficient, help us to be more responsive and provide analytical tools that we can show how to do it. And so those are all kind of very closely connected. And so I think over the next 3 months is when we really dive into that and see where we could go.
Great. Thank you. All right, Chief. Thanks so much. Nice job. Appreciate everything you're doing. Glad to have you on board. Can't believe you've only been here 6 months. Accomplished a lot, and I'm really happy to see the positive news articles locally in our newspaper about the work that you've done and the people that you've hired.
Me too.
So thank you. Good
I'll
job.
take that over negative ones all day.
Okay, right.
Thank
All
you so
right,
much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, next up, we have 4 items on our consent agenda. The first item, 5.1, is a Community Renewable Energy Act board member appointment. This is replacing the alternate, which was Carly. Kaylin is our appointed member to that board. Carly was the alternate, but now that we have Alexa here, we would like for you guys to consider having her be our alternate, which is the first item on the consent. Second, 5.2 is the dog lease renewal with Grand County Board of Education. This renewal expired 2 years ago. This is the Bark Park. And just so for clarification purposes, in that lease, the city can opt out of that lease with 90-day notice if we need to. Hopefully that wouldn't be the case, but you never know. And then 5.3 is approval of the bills against the city of Moab in the amount of $342,419.34 and approval of the minutes for the regular meeting held on October 11th, 2022. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
All right, Motion by
second it.
Kalen, seconded by Jason. Any
Yeah.
discussion, Kalen? Jason?
No.
Anybody else? Luke?
Nope.
Ronnie?
Oh, I just wanted to throw a few questions out there. I don't need an answer necessarily tonight, but about the dog park lease renewal. Just something that would maybe be useful over time, because I know we've been short-staffed, but it does mention in Exhibit D that we're supposed to have daily animal control patrols of the park. And I just, because it's something we never get to talk about, I don't know if that had been happening. And then also, you guys who are pet owners may know occasionally there have been outbreaks of parvo or kennel cough in the community. So I'm just wondering, and this might be an outside thing, but it might just be nice to know as a council member and dog owner, if we do have something like that going on where there is a contagious, for example, canine disease, do we tend to post some kind of educational materials about that for people who might be exposed? And the final thing was just, I got a little bit confused. Exhibit D refers to, needing to carry an ID if you're in the dog park. And I was just trying to remember, maybe colleagues can help me remember. I can't remember if that was something we had discussed before about whether it actually needed to be in there. And I can't remember what the outcome of that was. If we thought, yeah,
I don't know about the history of that. This is, I believe,
Yeah.
it's the same lease we've used in the past.
yeah, I think there had just been a question about, if if you happen to not have an ID, how problematic is it that you're at the dog park without one? Or we somehow overseeing some opportunity to have more inclusivity? Or is there somehow just some basic law where that needs to stay in there? I know it's in Exhibit D, it's item 14. I can scroll there for a second, but anyway, I just couldn't remember because I thought somebody in the council had raised it before and I didn't know. I thought this is our opportunity to address it if it was a concern. Oh, here, I can read it. Any owner, caretaker, or handler shall possess a driver's license or government issued ID card.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, if there's like a dog fight.
But you-
Okay. Okay, that was my only question.
Do you,
That'd be the only reason I can think of to have it.
right. Do you have address any of the other questions that Ronnie
The,
brought?
the parvo question, I'm not sure that we're alerted if there is there is a dog that comes to the park
That's
with it. Yeah.
right.
Because I don't know, it's not necessarily like contact tracing, at least that I've experienced
Yeah.
before.
Okay,
Certainly
so
if we knew of something, we might want to like post a little sign like a dog with parvo was here, but
it's maybe just an educational thing for the community. If they know that dogs are passing, say, kennel cough at the dog park, just to inform
yeah,
the
I
city.
think,
Yeah.
that's a question that's sort of independent of the lease.
Mhm.
It's more
Yeah.
about how the Humane Society kind of
Yeah,
does their education about the parvo outbreaks.
cool. Thanks. That was it.
Thanks, Ronnie. All right, we have a motion on the table made by Jason, seconded by Tawny. All in, did I say?
Kaylin and seconded
Oh,
by
sorry.
Jason.
I was totally wrong on that one. We have a motion on the table to approve the consent agenda made by Kalen, seconded by Jason. Am I right, Tawny?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0. Thanks. Okay, next item is, Chuck, you're up to, talk to us about the award for the turnkey transit service vendor and a consideration of approval by the council. Jason has identified a conflict, and so Jason, you're welcome to sit at the dais or if you'd like to sit in the audience.
Yep. I'll
but you-
recuse myself from this.
So Jason will recuse himself from this, item. All right, Chuck.
Good evening. With me tonight is Richard Laurie, who's our transit coordinator. If you haven't met Richard before, you meet him tonight. In anticipation of an active transfer project, transit project. Trying to get in here. We had two proposals. This is a reminder. on our request for proposals for to provide transit services. And this is a project that started back in 2017 with a hotspot funding and has morphed over the years, and it's possible by a combination of funding from local government, the state of Utah, and the federal government. So all of the processes that we have gone through to get to this point have been scrubbed, if you will, or had to comply with the state and federal processes, both in terms of procurement, in terms of policies that we have in place on how we treat our contractors as a disadvantaged business enterprise goal that we had to include. There's all these things where you gotta say, got it. Yeah. And yeah, I've been there. So we've been through the process. We've had a selection committee review the two proposals, and we have it was a difficult choice. One of them was more locally focused, to be quite honest with you. But the other vendor, and if you look closely at their proposal, they'll be hiring a local manager and they'll be hiring local drivers as well. It's just that they don't have that system set up in place, that infrastructure at this time. It's my understanding. And there we go. Share screen. Oh, sorry. This was the approved budget. And as you can see, it's a 5-year budget. That'll take us for a total of, this is a 5-year pilot program with a total cost of $3,456,000 over the 5-year period. And you've seen this budget before. And this is the breakdown of how we had proposed to do it, with providing 2 levels of service. One is a micro transit, which is an on-demand service, whereas you can call and say, I need to go to the doctor, or I need to go downtown. They'll schedule you there, and it's not just call, there's smartphone apps or website or telephone. You'll have the opportunity to all 3 of those technological communications mechanism. And both proposals came in right at our budget level. Wanted to explain quickly. This is our service area. Colorado River up there on the north, northwest, and we'll run the fixed route, which is essentially going to be up and down Main Street, though there may be some, we don't have all the stops identified yet. We may be a couple of places where we'll turn off on a side street and have a bus stop, our fixed route stop. And that will extend down to the Mill Creek Drive or Aggie Boulevard intersection, and with possibly a stop up at the school at the top of the hill. And then the orange is the microtransit service area, and that'll extend from the river down to Meadow Drive, down in the county, outside of our city. Our city limits stop right about the Mill Creek Drive intersection, essentially moving south. And that's where we start in year 1. And we'll fine tune that map working with the vendor. Our peak season, I just want you to know that we've defined it in the RFP. Our peak season is mid-March through mid-October, because we're providing different levels of service for the peak season and the off-peak season, which is mid-October through mid-March. Now, might that after a year's time, go to, end of March through end of October, possibly? I mean, it's, all of this, it varies year to year, as you know, looking at sales tax revenue and population, but those were defined. And the reason we broke it up is, again, was to try and meet the budget. We tried to provide the highest level of service we could, with the money that's allotted, available. And we'll pursue more funding, but it's down the road. It's nothing, there's nothing, we don't have any secured funding at this point beyond what I showed you earlier. Moab Express was one of the vendors. In year one service, Moab Express, an overview is their vehicles were a 10-passenger American Disabilities Act accessible Sprinter van and a 7-passenger minivan. The service hours increase in years 2 and 5 with the addition of a 14-passenger ADA, non-ADA accessible Sprinter. For microtransit in year one, they provided 2 vehicles in the peak season and 1 vehicle in the off-peak season with reduced hours. And for a fixed route, they proposed to not do a fixed route in the first year, which was one of the things we asked them for. And part of the justification was in the first report analysis done by our consultant, they had suggested, based on budget, that we not do fixed route in the first year, we just do microtransit. But then UDOT came to us and said, we've got $1 million worth of ARPA funds. Do you guys want that? And so we said, sure. I mean, we already had the federal funding in the future, FTA funding, Federal Transit Authority money coming in. So we had to comply with federal requirements anyway. But with that, they said, what you do with that? And we put it into the fixed route in year one to provide that, as well as it's not just $1 million for year one, but it allowed us to do year one so that we can have 2 types of service from the beginning to collect data. And then the second vendor is Downtown, is their name. Their year one service. All vehicles are 13-passenger ADA accessible Ford Transits, which are vans, or the Ford Transit, you pick the seat up and it becomes a non-ADA accessible.
Chuck, will you pull the mic closer to you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yep. All vehicles are 13-passenger ADA accessible Ford Transit. All years of service have the identical service hours. So what they propose in year one is the same service hours they propose in year 2 through 5, which is what we essentially had asked for. Microtransit, 2 vehicles running year round with reduced hours for both vehicles in the off-peak season, because we think there'll be less demand, less tourists, because the system, I guess I should say, is for everyone. It's for locals, it's for tourists, it's for anyone who needs to use the system, has the ability to use the system. And there's no fare. It's for this 5-year period at this time, because there's enough funding to do that. And for year one, they'll provide fixed route with 1 vehicle running in the peak season. So that's one of the key differences between Downtowners and Moab Expresses was the fixed route in the first year. And then here's a proposal comparison, and I know this is a lot of numbers, and I gave you the proposal so you could have condensed this, but essentially this is tracks vehicle count for the microtransit up there in the reddish. So the blue column was our RFP, this was Moab Express, and then this was Downtown over here. And then these first 2 rows are for the microtransit service with the, as an example right here, the 1 being peak and the parenthetical 1 is for the off-peak. So the number of vehicles for microtransit for the peak would in year 1 would be 1 for, and then daily hours 12 and 8. Then the fixed route has vehicle count in the peak and off-peak and the daily hours. And then down below is cost per vehicle hour. And ours was an average because we averaged microtransit and our based on our consultant's recommendation and our review, microtransit and the fixed route, and the average was $90. And you can see over here, Moab Expresses is between 94 and 86 and 95, and then downtown it was at $73.28 for all 5 years. Then the service hours downtown is more hours, 9,430 than Moab Express had. And that's all that I have for sharing data with you. I'll leave that up there and be happy we can answer any questions that council may have.
Questions?
So what sort of performance requirements do you intend to include in a contract?
Such as, well, the hours,
Such as like so they've told us how many hours they're gonna have service.
Yep.
And they're gonna have to hire staff and to provide that. And so what happens if they don't? What happens if they fail to provide drivers consistently and
well,
there's noticeable gaps in service?
I think that's the breach of contract.
So will that be so do you know what terms you're going to propose when you're working out
Well,
we're going to
also-
authorize staff to negotiate details, so I'm just asking for a little more detail on that.
Yeah, sure.
piece.
So we advertise hours and they told us in their proposals what hours. They also told us, so Downtowner, who is our recommendation, based on meeting the criteria of the RFP plus value. In their proposal, they say that they're gonna hire what they call W-2 employees, which would be, regular employees as opposed to contract employees by the hour. So we would expect that in the contract negotiations, they'll follow through in everything in that proposal. And the record keeping is gonna be a big part of this, so that's why Richard's gonna be busy with the record keeping as far as availability of drivers. If they're not there, that'll be a problem. They won't get paid. If they don't meet the service that we require, they won't get paid. If they don't have a vehicle that works Monday afternoon because it's broke down or because someone called in, they don't get paid for Monday afternoon. Right? Unless they make it up at another time that we agree upon. That's one of the performance measures. If I follow your question.
Well, let me try to rephrase it. So we've had different experiences, like this was before your time, but we tried franchising within Trash Hauler at one point. And they took the contract instead of the local franchisee who'd had it for years, and it was somewhat disastrous. And the city ended up terminating that contract and rehiring the local, even though they may not have scored as well or like had the best, been the cheapest. I don't remember like why they were chosen. But I'm appreciative that even though the Downtowner hasn't operated here before, they operate in communities that have similar labor challenges.
Yes, Aspen as an example.
Yes, but I just want to know that if things don't work out with either of them, if the contract will support, and they're going to be making investments in vehicles. And so I want to know that the city will be able to perform on this contract if they're not meeting expectations.
Yeah, contract has been reviewed by our attorneys. And those details that I talked about in the motion include everything from making sure that everyone understands the routes, everyone understands the hours, the expectations that, yeah, we met the application, the smartphone app and both of the Moab Express's partner via, they have experience as does Downtowner, nationwide with this type of a program. Yeah, I think in the contract negotiation, we go forward with believing that people are going to do what they have to say, like with every contract. And then there's always termination for cause in there as, you know, which you hope you don't have to go to. But that's always there. I mean,
Mhm. Okay, thanks.
Ronnie.
Oh, I didn't know, if one of the attorneys wasn't listening in, if they want to add anything to that, but, my questions were more, I didn't know if you could go back to that budget check about, who's paying for what. And I know this is just focused on, you know, what Moab Express or Downtowner would do, but I honestly, I had a discussion with someone at the county who had kind of forgotten what their, what they, had offered to put forward. So I know we have the city, county, local line. Do you remember how that breaks up between the city and the county?
I think
Let's see, the county has agreed it's a lump sum payment of
Okay.
250.
250 or 275. one of the
Yeah,
two.
on the order of that.
Yeah.
And so, and we make up the difference, whatever that is.
Okay, and
So
then
theirs
just,
is fixed.
okay, and also as a reminder to me, because I know we went through when we were trying to figure all this out, and the agenda summary does reference that we're gonna have, you know, some costs to the city that are outside of this, and it's
Mhm.
largely Richard's salary, but you know, there were times when that kind of ebbed and flowed from somewhere in the 30,000s to, I don't know, maybe 78,000 or something. Because I think we had marketing and some other things in there. So I just wanted to check when I look at that 55, and I know this is again not entirely connected to these two companies, but since it's up, just as a reminder to me,
So if
is
you take,
that kind of what
Rodney,
we're,
if you take,
yeah,
if you take this, I think I know where you're going from.
yeah,
The 3,456,000
yeah,
over there on the far right.
Yeah.
And then go down 3 rows to the
Yeah.
279,000.
Yeah.
Those two add up to the 3,735,000 up above.
okay. But just as a reminder to us that
Yeah.
that 279,000 is being covered by the city specifically, right?
Yeah.
And just so
Okay.
you know too, Ronnie,
Yeah.
we do have an opportunity for some additional funding that we'll be talking about during strategic plan that would help support this.
Okay, and then the last question, I didn't know if it was premature, but it was for you, Richard, because in that conversation with the county, someone was like, "Oh, you know, I'm really excited about transportation," and they were just getting geeky, but they had some experience in it from another job. So, is it too premature if we have people who have questions about the transit program to contact you, or should they be contacting Chuck, just so anybody listening knows?
If
Yeah.
council awards tonight. then
Yeah.
Yes, they can certainly call Richard
Okay.
anytime with questions, and we have more, and some answers will be more developed than others.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
But we'll share all the information we have.
Okay, and Richard, you're in the directory on the city website, right?
Yeah. On the
So
city
it's- if-
website.
yeah, they'll get them to engineering and then,
Okay,
yeah, we're on
Okay.
on the website.
all right, thanks.
Thanks, Ronnie. Anybody else? Luke, do you have any questions out there in Luke land?
I do
Ooh.
not.
Okay,
I had a last question.
sure,
I'm
Ronnie.
sorry if I missed it, but if we did approve this tonight, I'm just, because I'm thinking, I had this question, I bet other people might. If all of the stars align, or could we expect to actually be providing service by March of 23?
Yeah, I actually think it's gonna be sometime in February.
Okay,
Because just working through some details.
Yeah.
And supply chain and all that, but they feel pretty comfortable. This Downtown leases their vehicles. They have had a long-standing relationship, and they feel comfortable that they can get those vehicles. And then it's hiring the drivers. You know, that's gonna be
okay,
a test.
thanks.
The other thing that came up too is, I think Caitlin, you brought it up about the potential for electric vehicles for this transit service. And the Downtowner is able to, they're gonna change out their vehicles every 2 years.
They
Correct.
do typically, and they'll look at vehicles. They said that it's hard to get those vehicles right now. Moab
Sure.
Express said they could get some electric now. But it was a premium price because they're going so high.
Right.
We think that with the technology changing and supply chains changing, maybe in 2 years, the prices will be down,
Right,
hopefully.
right.
And turnover to electric is certainly a possibility.
Great, good. Any other questions? All right, I'll ask for a motion to approve the turnkey transit service.
I'll move to approve Downtowner Holdings LLC to provide turnkey, not turkey, transit services, and authorize staff to negotiate details and the mayor to sign appropriate contract documentation as needed.
Great. Do I have a second?
Second,
Seconded by Kalen. Discussion, Tawny?
No.
Kalen?
No.
Anybody else? All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of approving the turnkey transit services?
aye.
I,
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard, welcome aboard. Good luck.
Thank
We're
you.
looking forward to this. This is exciting.
Yes.
I'm hopeful that it's all going to work out.
Be a new adventure.
Yeah, we'll be. All right, next up, we have an agreement between the city of Moab and the Friends of Anonymous Park. And you got an email from Annie today to amend that motion, if you so desire, to include the site plan. This is an agreement with, staff is really looking at all of our contracts and agreements. Some of them expired, some of them don't exist. This is the beginning of, we're probably going to be seeing a lot of contracts and agreements coming up over the next couple of months because we feel it's important to have agreements in writing signed. Friends of Anonymous Park is an awesome organization. They've been doing a lot of work down there at the bike park, which half got washed away in the flood, which is unfortunate, but they're out there working all the time. And I'm really happy to see that they've become a 501c3 that enables them to get some donations.
Yes.
So this is a really good opportunity. So
Yeah,
Annie, go ahead.
Yeah, before I get started, I'd like to introduce, if you aren't familiar with Mark Howe and Tracy Bentley. They are members of Friends of Anonymous Bike Park, and they've worked really hard to become a 501c3. So you guys probably know the history of the bike park more than I do, but I know roughly around 2010, it was very much a community-driven effort to start a bike park off of 500 West. And while the city has assisted over the years, the big heavy lift as far as building and maintaining and the technical expertise has come from volunteers within the community, and they have done an amazing job. And so while we've had a positive relationship with them over the years, it has been very informing. And so over the past years, Mark and Tracy and others have taken a step to becoming a 501c3, and then this agreement will formalize the city's relationship with that nonprofit. And like I said, the place would not exist without volunteers, so we're very excited to support them. This agreement doesn't outline any sort of financial responsibilities. It allows them to kind of formalize our relationship with them. So I think it'll be more competitive if they work for grants and then supporting in their efforts, and also kind of outline some liability issues.
Great. Thanks, Annie. Questions for Annie? Ronnie?
I was just going to thank Kaylin for just addressing the question about kind of scope of land. And I just had a side question, which probably really is not important, but I thought it's my opportunity to ask. In the agreement under the recitals, it just happens to mention FOAB, blah, 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 nonprofit organization and volunteer group of community members that's dedicated to the improvement, maintenance, and operation of properties owned by the city. So I just didn't know, it seemed to me, given the land description, this was contemplating a relationship around the Anonymous Park area, but I was just curious, are we, should I think of it as a larger agreement where we might be partnering on other city properties?
It could evolve to that, and I think if it did evolve to that, we might, amend our agreement or start a new one.
Okay,
Right
that
now,
was
we're
just, I was
focusing
just
on the
making
current
sure I
agreement.
understood that part of the scope. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Luke, anything out there? No? Okay. I'll call for a motion to approve the agreement between the city of Moab and the Friends of Anonymous Bike Park.
I move to approve the agreement between the city of Moab and the Friends of Moab,
Bike Park.
of Anonymous Moab Bike Park.
Mhm.
And to add Exhibit A, which clarifies the specific site location.
Thank you.
I will second.
Seconded by Ronnie. Any discussion, Kaylin?
Just thanks for Exhibit A to clarify the
Thank you for the note, yeah.
location.
Ronnie?
Nope.
Anybody else? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion passes 5-0. I have to tell you guys that one of my favorite things is driving down Williams Way and you can't see the bike park because it's down low, and all of a sudden a bike comes flying out of nowhere. with somebody on top. It's just like, whoa, it's just really cool to see. Thank you for all your work. Yep. All right, lastly, do we have Lisa? Hi, Lisa. Our last item of business tonight is the extension of the vesting period for Lions Back Resort Project. I'm going to go ahead and just turn this over to Lisa. I know there were some questions. I think a lot of them got answered. But Lisa, if you could just go over quickly what this means and what we're actually voting on tonight.
Oh, Lisa, we can't.
Can you hear me?
No, not really. Yeah, can you get closer to your microphone? Maybe that's the problem.
I'm putting my face kind of close to the computer. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Better, yeah.
Okay. The focus that we've got tonight is on the extension of the vesting period in the contract on the Lions Back project. And the city council agreed back in 2008 to extend the vesting period. It was already extended to 15 years. And then there were provisions in the agreement that allowed for it to be extended further. During the day, we've gotten some questions that I wanted to answer first through the city council members and their constituencies. One question that came in was what was meant by the 75-month period and how was that calculated? What is happening here is the extension request is to go to October 31st, 2029. It would normally, this agreement would expire on July 7th, 2023. But the extension request is for 75 months, and that's the approximate amount of time that was spent in litigation. And there's two ways of looking at this. There's the contract analysis and the common law analysis. But under the 75 months period, it's a reasonable request that they're making, because the developers, from the time the project began, has been involved in ongoing litigation. And we've looked at the information about the cases and the timelines that were involved. And the first one was the Moab Local Green Party case versus Moab City. That case was filed October 9th, 2008. The decision came out April 12th, 2012. But ultimately, the case was totally resolved because it had gone down to the district court on remand on October 29th, 2012. The timeline from October 9th to April 12th is 48 months and 20 days in the local Green Party case. And then in Wallingford, the case was filed on March 30th, 2017, and it was dismissed on August 14th, 2020. That represents 40 months and 15 days. The January 2020 date is referenced in the email, is a date that the Court of Appeals has issued its attached decision, which was January 24th, 2020. But in fact, that decision remanded the case to the district court, and the final dismissal occurred on August 14th, 2020. So really what you're looking at, if you add those two up, it's 88 months and 35 days. And that is not what the company, if you will, is asking for. They're simply requesting 75 months, which is approximately the amount of time that the project was forestalled due to litigation. And if you look at the contract says that, and I'm saying the contract, I mean the pre-annexation agreement, in section 2.5.1, it authorizes you as a city council to extend the vesting period for an additional reasonable time. And there's two criteria. One, if the company diligently pursued the development, and second, the project was delayed from completion because of events not reasonably within control of the company. So if you examine those two criteria, obviously they've diligently pursued development. They have continued to do so once the litigation ended. They're now getting prepared to record the plat. They're in the first phase, doing a great deal of work on infrastructure. And they have spent to date around $6 million to put this project together. Despite the litigation, they are now moving forward because they were stopped until then. So that additional reasonable time of 75 months is what is being requested. And that is an administrative decision that you make, but it's in light of the fact that it's very reasonable. They're not asking for more or less that's in the contract. They're simply asking for where they were harmed in this sense, and even less than for what they were harmed. Then the second question that I know we needed to address was whether or not the phasing that they're in. There are 5 phases, and those phases were spelled out in the development and phasing agreement that was passed in 2009. And in the development and phasing agreement, it says a couple things. One of which is that the city acknowledges and agrees that a period of extended vested rights has been granted for the project and property as provided in the pre-annexation agreement. And those vested rights are intended to apply to the development approvals and the development agreement. So that extension of the vesting period is what you agreed to, and the development rights and approvals are not being changed, simply because it looks as though maybe they're doing casitas. They're calling them casitas instead of single family dwellings. They really haven't changed anything different. If in the phasing, the sequence is different, they're going to put in the storm drain before they put in the curb and gutter. That's all administrative by the company and something that you don't have to worry about, that is handled in the contract with the development approvals and the development agreement. So they're not getting asked anything more than they've asked for in doing this. It's an administrative modification that was made. Somebody had asked one of you council members, has it changed in density? Because we're now calling them casitas versus family dwellings. No, that is not what has occurred. And so if you look at the phasing, they have certain family dwelling units that they will have in each of the 5 phases. They are in phase 1 now. So I guess the last thing I wanted to mention is it was asked of us to do an independent analysis of the pre-annexation agreement and the development and phasing agreement, and looking into the extension that could be granted for that vesting period of 15 years. As I said before, it would otherwise expire, this 15 years, July 7th, 2023. So there's still time on them for them to perform. However, the contract allows for an extension for bases that are here, litigation. And also, the analysis that we did, we looked at the common law portion of it, and that is normally in a contract, and when you've got a situation that occurs where it's litigation, normally the timeline is told, meaning it's stayed, and that is common law. It's frequently utilized throughout all the states in the United States. And an ombudsman opinion was rendered in a case analogous in Park City, where a project was started by Park City Mine. And before getting too much detail, they were delayed in recording the plat within that 1-year time period. And the ombudsman, because they were being sued, not unlike Moab City, they were being sued by residents who weren't happy with the development. The ombudsman said, yes, that should be told. That time should not count against those people who are trying to complete the project. And so based on that common law principle, it's only equitable that you would toll. You can't unreasonably withhold that period of time when it's appropriate. And then finally, the question is pretty important for you to consider, and that is based on both the contract and the common law, the company itself has numerous provisions that protect them, which you as a city council had agreed to in 2008. And the risks associated with denying the extension are pretty significant. And because the company has already relied to the tune of $6 million, they have diligently pursued the project. And because of that, they also have relied in a way that if you were to now deny them, it's even possible that there could be punitive damages. In the contract, it states that attorney's fees would be rewarded in litigation. Also, if the city is sued and we pursue it and the tolling analysis is upheld, we will have questioned the ombudsman's opinion, which is not controlling law, but seen as legal precedent, which could also impose $250 a day penalties for the period of time that you're involved in the litigation. And that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars on top of it. So the risks associated with denying the agreement are significant, and the reasons to not give an extension of that vesting period do not exist. So if you were to deny it, it seems to us that it would be indefensible, and that if you as a city council, as the city of Moab were sued, we would have great difficulty in defending you. That concludes the summary and analysis that we've done at our end on it independently.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa? So
No.
basically, we are considering extending the vesting potential for the Lions Back Resort because of the legal litigation that took place that stalled the project. And just for clarification, this does not change any of the plans that were already approved. This is just extending the vesting of the project. So I'm going to ask for a motion to approve that extension.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the extension of the vesting period for Lions Back project until October 31st, 2029, and authorize the city staff to take such steps needed to effectuate the extension.
Great.
I'll second that.
All right, motion made by Jason, seconded by Tawny. I'm going to do a roll call vote on this issue. We'll start with you, Jason.
Aye.
Tawny,
Aye.
Luke,
I,
Ronnie,
Aye.
Kalen.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
All right, you're done. You bet. Okay, moving on. Administrative reports.
That
We-
one should have been moved to the top. She forgot to leave that.
Oh,
So
okay,
we're
so we
right back
don't,
at
so I was gonna say, we don't have any we've
No.
never done administrative
I
reports.
think we
Why
did
didn't
one
I catch
last
that?
meeting. I don't know.
Okay. That's okay. That's okay. I should have caught that, Summer. Carly, you're up. City manager updates.
Of course, I just bit into a Jolly Rancher. Pardon me. Couldn't help myself. It's my favorite time of the year when we have just candy laying about. Okay. Couple items for the report. First of all, you've been receiving several emails about water service interruptions throughout the city. Some of those have been just water main failures, a PRV failure, but a few of the others have been due to the tie-in to the Mill Creek water line, our brand new Mill Creek water line in the Tesher Walker Locust area. And just so you're aware, that will be continuing in the next 2 to 3 weeks as we continue those tie-ins. The interruptions last about 10 hours as we do the tie-in. The residents are contacted individually with door hangers, and we let dispatch know. We let the fire department know, and my front desk and the treasurer's office too. So people should be aware that that's going to be happening. We've got just a few more weeks of that inconvenience, and we thank residents for being patient as we do that work. Patrons of the MRAC might notice that the pool and showers are a little bit cooler than usual, and that's because a water heater has failed. We have 2 of them, and so right now one is just running. So it's not nearly as comfortable in the pool or in the showers, but we're working to acquire and install a new water heater. And we're just having trouble because of supply chain issues. But that's been going on. The RAPTAC committee met for the first time last week. It's a really great mix of community members. I was really enthused by the discussion. They haven't made any selections yet. This was a preliminary meeting to sort of set up the structure of the committee and how they would be choosing from all the applications that we hope to receive from the community to spend some of that RAP tax money. As we've been cleaning up from the storm, we did get some help from Team Rubicon. They were originally slated to be in town for about 4 weeks, helping with the cleanup, but they ended up only staying for 1 week. I'm not sure, why they departed early, but I imagine there has been, huge demand for them in other areas that have been impacted by flooding. So that has sort of caused a setback in our cleanup efforts, but we're reevaluating, and I'll be meeting with Cara in the coming weeks about some next steps. So that's why the debris might look pretty static for the next few weeks as we try to muster some more support and help for the cleanup.
Are there any issues that we need to worry about with the debris? I mean, there's so many debris piles, right behind my house, there's just tons of debris, and I'm thinking skunks, there's gonna be a lot of
Pests. Mhm.
mice and all kinds of things that could be attributed to all those debris piles.
I think that that is a risk, which is why we want to get it cleared out as quickly as possible. I can tell you at the current workload of my park staff and street staff, it would take about probably a year of them working 50% of their capacity to clean up all that debris. This is a very rough number, but we were trying to understand the level of effort that we had, which is probably not feasible because we already have full-time work for them. So it might be that we just try to get Team Rubicon again, another pass from them, or even explore some interagency cooperation with sister agencies like in maybe Monticello, Richfield, Price, who might be able to come down for some sort of mutual aid event and help us tackle the work. I did ask Levi and some others, is this something the community can do? And unfortunately, no, because it requires heavy equipment. It's really dangerous, specialized work in the stream channel. So it's not something that we can just sort of roll up our sleeves and get done, but we're just going to be reevaluating. And we'll be presenting a flood mitigation alternatives workshop for our next meeting on November 8th too. So we can talk more about, it's less about cleanup and more about infrastructure. But just know we are working on the cleanup. It's just going to hit a snag that we didn't anticipate. And those are all my updates.
Thanks, Carly. Next up, we have council reports. And Luke, we'll start with you. So if you feel like getting off the call after your report, please feel free to do that.
All right, cool. Thank you. Yeah, not a ton. I attended the local homeless council a couple of weeks ago, and in a positive note, there's a slightly lower count of children who are at imminent risk of homelessness. Total numbers right now are looking about 59 unduplicated individuals, 10 of which were youth. Seacaven has had a full shelter for a pretty prolonged period of time and has had to resort to housing people in hotels and at campsites, which are also pretty full right now, and costly as well with the increased visitation. They do have homeless prevention funding for anyone who has experienced domestic violence or sexual assault within the past year, and they can help cover rent and utilities. It can't cover mortgages and stuff like that. We got an update from the Moab Land Trust, and Community Rebuilds has closed on 15 more units with 1 more coming. The Housing Authority has signed on for another 10 self-help homes, and they've also received funding for 32 units of apartments, and construction is going to start next year on those. And then there's another 24 apartment rental units in pre-development. And then another one is they have a developer working on 12 twin homes for moderate income housing, so about 120% of AMI. And applications for those should be going up within the next year. If anybody is interested, please reach out to Caitlin Myers, the executive director. So they've been kicking butt over there. They finally have homeowners in their homes. And as we can see, a lot more is on the way. And then the Housing Authority itself updated us that they were able to get waivers for Section 8 vouchers to be able to cover up to 120% of local median rental prices. So it should put the Housing Authority in a better position to actually use up those vouchers within our kind of more expensive market. And they still have Section 8 vouchers available exclusive to veterans. So if there are any veterans in need of housing assistance, those are out there and available. And then other than that, I just participated in I attended the powwow over the weekend, and not much else, I think.
Great. Thanks, Luke. All right, Kaylin.
I attended a solid waste district meeting and it was mostly budget prep for the coming year. I attended a Mountain Towns 2030 debrief with Ronnie and some folks from the county and Alexi. And it was just nice to have an interagency discussion about sustainability and maybe a little bit more collaboration between the city and the county, which are both working on it. I had a meeting with city and county staff and a couple of other electeds on the lighting ordinance, which we discussed last time. And I think we made good progress on understanding the issues and starting to identify solutions to some of them. So more on that in the coming weeks. I attended a meeting with Alexi with the Utah Clean Cities organization in Salt Lake. They work on transportation electrification. And so it seems like they offer some services and will be continuing to explore that. And I attended an MSG meeting. Tastes great, but empty calories. Moab, San Juan, and Grand. I don't remember what happened. It was mainly San Juan and Grand issues, but the mayor was there. Maybe she'll have more to say on it.
I doubt it.
And then this wasn't a meeting, but I did have contact with August and Ben about another issue, and they mentioned that they're planning to include in their budget proposal for some work to take up on sustainable tourism where our vision plan left off. So I look forward to hearing more about that. That's what I've got.
Thanks, Kaylin. Connie.
I attended a Moab Museum meeting, which was pretty interesting. They are in the middle of redoing their bylaws that were circa 1950 something. And their non-existent ever policies and procedures manual for employees. So that was an interesting discussion. And I attended a Canyonlands Healthcare Special Service District meeting, and that was mostly just a business meeting, but the care center the district is in the process of creating their budget, and they are having meetings the next 2 Wednesdays at the Ground Center, which are open meetings. So if you just have a burning desire to come learn about budgets, they're open to the public. Oh, and I had a meeting with Alexi last week too, and I think that's about it.
Thanks, Connie. Ronnie.
Let's see, a bunch of meetings. On the 12th of October, I attended our visioning consultants presentation that they did at Star Hall. On the 17th, I attended an UMTRA Site Features Committee meeting, which I'll comment on the UMTRA stuff at the end. Kaylin mentioned our Mountain Towns 2030 debrief. Thanks again to Kaylin for organizing that. I too met with the new sustainability director. I recommend if anybody hasn't, it's great to have a one-on-one to catch up with her. I attended several Science Festival Moab events, and now I'm just ever so excited about snake ecology and recommend the documentary Inhabitants if you're interested in climate change and how traditional Indigenous knowledge has allowed people to be good stewards of the land for millennia. There is a copy at the library. And also there was an excellent Water in the West panel on Friday night that filled Star Hall that I'd also highly recommend. And now I know how to use the phrase non-soon in a sentence. And our October 20th meeting of GWISA, Grand Water and Sewer Service Agency, was canceled, as often happens with one of our meetings of the month, because we have two, and we often don't have enough agenda items that we need to address. Going back to the meeting on October 17th of the UMTRA Site Futures Committee, people may recall that by resolution, the city and the county agreed that every 5 years, we should revisit the community vision for what could potentially happen on the tailings pile site if local government becomes the holder of that land over time, which is one possibility. And I just want to thank Russell and Koch, who has been for some time, was involved in this process and was our former UMTRA site liaison. And many of you may know him from his years at the BLM, but he's the chair of the committee. Just to give you guys a little background, and there are 13 members on the committee, assuming I counted right. And those, you'd think I'd put them in a order I could read them, but just to help you guys know who's on the committee, we have, as far as I can tell, 6 of those 13 members participated in the 2013 process and 2018 process, or at least the 2018 process. We have a number of members who are elected. The mayor is on there. I'm on there. Grand County Commissioner Mary McGann is on there. We have a number of representatives from different land agencies. Dave Pells from the BLM. I didn't put this in order. Tony Mancuso from Utah DNR, and Amy Tendick from the National Park Service. Then we have 4 representatives from Grand County, planning and also economic development, which I think will be great, and a number of members at large who just have been great because they've been involved from the very beginning and keep sticking with it. Saxon Sharp, who's a member at large and has graciously agreed to be the vice chair, and Norm Boyd, who happens to be Tawny Knutson Boyd's partner, who also is just great because he has so much knowledge of the area and also happens to be, I think, a nephew of Charlie Steen. Is that right, Tawny? Yeah. So anyway.
He'll be thrilled you read all that out.
I know this from committee work, yes. But at any rate, this will be a process of a few months whereby we decided to start back with the last community vision we did in 2018, which the city and the county adopted, to use that as a starting point. And this is kind of a process we do every 5 years, both to revisit, as you dig further down into the pile, you kind of learn more about the site and what may or may not be possible, or at least what we know today might change in 5 years. But it also becomes a useful tool for the mayor and other people who go to Washington, D.C. to lobby for funds for the site, to explain to legislators some of the vision the community has for potentially using the site for various things, from economic development to recreation and what have you. So anyway, just the main thing is the public should know that we will be putting information out in social media and mainly on the Grand County Connects. I don't know if I call it a portal. I don't know what the right word is. I'm not techie enough for this, but anyway, currently on the Grand County website, if you go onto their homepage, there's a little image of a tree, and I guess they call that the Grand County Connects. If you click on that, they have a few featured pages on there. Like, they have a whole fabulous page for planning and housing, and there will be one for the Site Futures Committee for the UMTRA site. And we will start with an open house here using the City Council chambers on Wednesday, the 16th of November, so people can kind of come and review, talk to committee members, review the maps that we've had from the past. We usually have big maps, sticky notes you can put on for various things, if possible, that you might like to see at the site. But honestly, if you have questions about the history of the site or the process, there should be committee members available to talk about that. Another thing to note is part of this whole process, as we start to think about more of the tonnage, and I'm going to mix my meetings now because we just had a Moab tailings pile steering committee, one of those words I got wrong, but anyway, meeting today. We were just talking about how on Monday, the crews working out there will reach the point where they will have moved 13 million tons of tailings. And just as a reminder, we've kind of thought there might be about 16 million tons. So we keep getting closer and closer, and it's always great to leave reach these points, but then you have to think after you get to the point where you move enough dirt, then you have to continue to address the groundwater issues. And so there's still a lot we don't know about what the site may look like. So the Department of Energy's Legacy Management Department, after emergency management finishes it, will take that on in perpetuity. So we can't really tell you today if the goal is to sculpt that land back into what it looked like originally, which was kind of a big, Joette can speak to it, but if you look at historic photos,
It had one
of a big-
cottonwood tree on it.
yeah. But the goal is to return it to its original state. There is, when people first started looking at the site, and granted, we don't know as we dig deeper, they're currently digging up autoclaves and, you kind of see what you find. And there'll be a long period of groundwater mitigation having to do with uranium and ammonia. But, the first 2013 vision we did, we thought, oh, well, we might have so much of these 400 some acres to work with outside of the floodplain. But then over time, the sense was, well, the floodplain actually probably incorporates more. And there's now discussion among scientists about maybe revisiting some floodplain maps and going out from the 100-year floodplain to the 500-year floodplain. So just know a lot of these are, big vision concepts that we as a community are trying to have, but just know in the back of our minds, we always know we don't know what we know until Department of Energy finishes digging and assessing the soil and the groundwater. But at any rate, you'll be seeing stuff about the open house on the 16th. Our Site Futures Committee is actually going to do on the ground tour over to Grand Junction to visit with former Grand Junction residents and community leaders and members of the Department of Energy Legacy Management Program to learn how they transformed their old uranium mill site. Took them about 20 years from the time they took possession of the land to turn it into a public park, but we're going to visit the park and talk to them about their process and how they acquired land, how they paid for it, and that probably is much more than you want to know, and I could probably keep going, but I don't know if the mayor has specific questions about today's meeting. I'm just trying to, I told you, Joette, today's steering committee meeting was relatively short. So we just reviewed some of these things and things that are coming up with Site Futures. I don't know if there will be an official celebration of the 13 millionth ton. There should at least be a press release, and we do have a fun magnetic map where you had this one little triangle on a magnetic map for each 1 million tons, and then when they move it, it gets to move over to a different board. So this is how exciting it gets for us. So at some point, I'm sure the magnet will move, and maybe there will be a gathering. And then I guess just a few other things that might interest people is in terms of longer term planning. One thing to understand about groundwater is they do spend a lot of time discussing how to get the uranium and ammonia out. And they're just going through a process now of producing what's called a groundwater compliance action plan, a GCAP, which is something they have to do for the site. And it goes through a long process of review by different government agencies, including the Nuclear Regulatory Committee. They're hoping to have the plan approved by 2025, and that's just how long these things take. They go through a 30% completion plan and review, and then 60 and then 90. So just know they're in that process. The 30% plan is being reviewed by the Nuclear Regulatory Committee, then we'll go to 60%. They are getting help, and this is kind of interesting for those of you who might have ties to this, from various national labs around the country. So a lot of you might be familiar with Lawrence Livermore or Berkeley. They said there's some other labs involved. I'm not sure if Argonne's involved, basically to help think through different approaches that could be taken to mitigate groundwater. And one of the things that they will be doing, which apparently was talked about in your July meeting that I missed, but I don't know if the public knew about this, is there is a naturally occurring mineral called hydroxyapatite, which is very stable and was used in Rifle, Colorado, to capture and extract some of the uranium. And I guess in other places, it's been pretty effective in helping with that process. So anyway, the national labs are looking at that, and they might be having a trial use of that on our site. Let me just see if there's anything else that interests you. And just know, aside from the open house that the Site Futures Committee will be doing, there will be a survey being developed for the community. So that will help promote that at some point too. I think that was it without going too crazy. But
Thanks.
yeah,
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 thanks,
if you want
Ronnie.
to get geeky later, Joette, I could probably
I
find
know.
a few things.
I
for
was
you.
just gonna say, Ronnie and I are tailings pile nerds.
Yeah,
We've been working on this for a long time. Tawny was involved in this. A lot of people were involved in this, and I can't express enough how much of a big deal this is. I mean, it may now not sound like it, but 13 million tons of uranium tailings, and we're down to 3 million. And they just started moving it. It's been what, 10 years now, 13 years, I think, 2009. We never thought we'd be this close this fast. So the work that's being put into it and the work that has been put into it over the years is pretty remarkable. And so I really appreciate the detail. Maybe not everybody will, but I certainly do. So thank you, Ronnie, for that, and more to come. You're going to be hearing about this. This is a passion of both of ours, so we'll be talking about it a lot. Jason, do you have anything as exciting as the tailings
No,
property?
Is that mineral that pulls out other minerals or whatever?
well, that's a good question. I only heard mention of uranium. There may be some ties to ammonia, but
I think
I'm
I
still
have a
trying to
T-shirt
understand.
from the first milestone from Energy Solutions. When they had the big
Oh.
when they had the big barbecue. You
Yeah,
remember that?
right. Yeah.
That's good to hear. I only had a couple things that are pretty quiet couple weeks. I did attend on the 12th the visioning open house. And Ronnie and Luke were both. Luke, I don't think he mentioned it, but he was there as well. And it was really good to hear what people had to say about the final product and the final vision. And it was good. And then on the 18th, I had a Grand County EMS Special Services board meeting. They did approve a tentative budget for next year. They talked about the kind of where they're at with things. It's kind of funny. They're kind of like other health core organizations that have had kind of a tumultuous year, and stuff. And not as many calls or calls down slightly, profitable calls that they usually can make. They kind of, help support themselves. We're down a little bit. Sales tax was down, as we know, which affects them. And then something else that kind of affected their budgets was the lack of wildfires. Is a pretty big, thing for them, sending out support for wildfires. And there wasn't as many wildfires in the West. I think they said 0, right? Or maybe 1.
I think we had crews go out on maybe 3, but we might have done like 5 or 6 last year.
Last year
It's
it was a pretty big line item last year for what they did. And so they are also working, in their budget for next year. They're kind of, trying to negotiate, how to make things work for their employees, with doing cost of living advances, as well as their, their, like everyone else, their healthcare insurance is going way up. So but other than that, so I attended that. They came up with some pretty creative ways to attain their budget goals, and then it was good. And that was all I had with that. They're looking for they're going to be posting some board positions, and that's about it.
Great. Thank you, Jason. I just have a couple of things. I've signed 2 proclamations this week. One was a proclamation that proclaiming October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I've got this here, it'll go on record. And also a proclamation that declares October 23rd to the 31st as Red Ribbon Week. And this proclamation was presented to the kids at HMK. The chief and I were able to go and make a little talk about Red Ribbon Week. That's a hard one to say, which is drug-free, the drug-free environment. So that was fun. The kids were great. I think we did all right in our presentations. It was hard to tell. It was early in the morning and it was cold, but the kids had a great crowd. Yeah, it was a tough crowd, but it was fun. I also, this week seems to be timed entry week. A lot of meetings this week with the state. I met with the Park Service today to talk about some of the ideas that they have to tweak the program to make it better. to adapt it. We very much are in support, I believe, of continuing the timed entry system. Carly and I will be meeting with the state and local tourist officials on Thursday, and Jason, if he's available, he'll be there as well. I think there's also a chamber meeting with the same folks, and then on Friday, there's a meeting that's open to the public with everybody, I guess. So a lot of discussion around timed entry. We'll see where it goes. My hope is that we continue it for another year at least, and tweak it out and make it better. Meeting with Congressman John Curtis tomorrow morning at my office. Carly and I will be meeting with him just to talk about a variety of issues, mainly the flood and protect funding that we can perhaps tap into at the federal level. And then I also met with Leanna from USU to talk about an appointment to the advisory board, and Jason has agreed to do that. So at our next meeting, I need to make a recommendation to nominate Jason to serve on that advisory committee. And then the president of the university actually makes the appointment. So that'll be on our next agenda. And that's all I have.
We didn't have a proclamation for National Tide Ends Day on Sunday.
No, I didn't know about that proclamation. What is it?
National Tide Ends Day,
Tight ends day, like
like
football?
football.
Oh, I should have
We
done
should.
that, provided that it was like a Pittsburgh Steeler. Okay. All right, that's it. We, next, we need to go into an executive session to discuss purchase and exchange of lease of real property and also, pending litigation. Do I have a motion? If I could have a motion to state,
One at a time, I think. We can't do it for both.
right, but we can make a motion to go into both with two motions.
Yeah, why don't we do one and then go into session and then
Come out and do it again?
another one. Mhm.
Seems inefficient.
This doesn't
And
seem,
we also don't have to do it for the second.
well,
What would you like?
can I make a preference?
What would you like a motion for?
I would
What
like a
makes that
motion to go into, one motion to go into closed session to discuss exchange lease of real property. One motion, and then another motion to go into executive session during that same time period to discuss pending litigation. So we'll start out with
Okay.
so we're gonna have two motions. Is
Does
that
this have
okay?
to do with record keeping, that it helps to have them
I don't
separate?
know what, it's because Carly's the boss. and
No,
she
no.
just-
Want to make sure it's super clear.
Yeah,
on
yeah,
if
yeah.
there's a
Okay,
difference
well,
on the-
I will make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property.
Motion made
second
by Tony, second by Jason, all in favor.
Aye.
All right, I'll need another motion to go into executive session to discuss pending litigation.
I make a motion to go into closed session to discuss reasonably imminent or pending litigation.
Made by Tawny, second
Second,
by Kayla, all in favor.
I
All right, we're going